partnered on a few small deals, and I went through the process of building houses with him, and then eventually just started doing it on my own. First with the land, just flipping the land, and then eventually putting houses on a couple lots at a time, doing a few specs at a time.
There is a new American dream. One that doesn't involve working till you're 65 before you start enjoying life. If you're someone looking for ways to regain control over your time and check off that bucket list now, you're in the right place. We share tips from experts on investing, personal finance, and mindset so that you can finally have the freedom to work less and live more. This is the Freedom Investing Podcast with your host, Chris Toribio.
What's going on, everyone? This is Chris Toribio with the Freedom Investing Podcast, and I am so happy you're here to join us for another amazing episode. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome to the show. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you can stay up to date with our latest episodes. Moving on to today's guest, we have Dan Haberkost. At the age of 25, Dan has managed to build an impressive real estate business and portfolio that allows him the freedom to live and work where he wants, while spending a tremendous amount of time in the mountains and on the beach. Dan wants to share his experience with others in hopes that his story will motivate and inspire them the same way he was by so many podcast guests before him. Dan, welcome to the show. Before we dive into it, give us a quick 2-minute rundown of who you are, your background, and where you are in your journey to achieving time freedom.
Yeah, Chris, first of all, thank you for having me on the podcast. I love the Freedom Investing Podcast. First and foremost, that's the whole reason I started a business. So to answer your question, I am originally from Ohio, a small town in Ohio. I like to joke I grew up in a cornfield, which I pretty much did. And, where I grew up, it was a pretty consistent sort of trajectory. Nobody really liked their job. In my family, we were lower middle class, and it was just kind of the same thing played out generation after generation. And I did not want to repeat that. I remember at a young age, 6, 7, 8 years old, being worried about money because I was hearing my parents talk about it and they were worrying about money, and that stuck with me from early on. So I had to start working pretty young, and by the time I was 16, I was managing a farm and a portfolio of rentals for my boss. Well, he would spend a good portion of the year out of the country, and then did that through high school, ran other businesses for other people through college while going to school full time. And it was around when I was 20-ish that I thought, well, I haven't had a whole lot of fun in high school and college like most kids do, but I had very clearly a skill set that was well beyond my age. I was used to managing people twice my age, running other people's businesses, and doing that while going to school full time. So I thought, okay, if I can manage these two things, I can certainly start some sort of a business and take what I've learned and put myself, years or decades ahead going into adulthood. So like everyone else, it was Rich Dad, Poor Dad that, was a light bulb moment, right? I read that book. 2 months later, I closed on my first duplex when I was 21, still finishing up college. And then from there, I didn't want to stay in Ohio, love the outdoors, love extreme sports. So I ended up moving to Colorado. And then out here, after buying a couple more rentals, I quickly realized that for what I'm looking to do, having a job and just buying investment properties slowly and steadily on the side was not going to work for me. So in 2019, I actually left my full-time job, and that's where Front Range Land, the active business I own, came about, which is all land and development. So if you think of, any real estate business as just a giant funnel, whether you're a realtor, you're wholesaling single family houses, or you have a land and development business like I do. It's just a funnel of leads coming in for lots at, 30 to 60 cents on the dollar. A lot of them we just flip or sell on terms, and then a few of them at a time I'll put a house or a duplex on and sell them. But that's the active business, which continually feeds the acquisition of more rentals. And so, live in Colorado, spend a lot of time in the mountains, and I'm continually working on my business.
That is fantastic. And what an experience that you had to have growing up, coming in from the age of 8 years old, being worried about money, hearing conversations between your mom and dad, and suddenly 8 years later, being in a position where you're managing other people's business. Mm-hmm. Kind of break that down a little bit. Talk to us about how you got yourself in that position at 16 years old, and what drove your motivation to go ahead and do that in the first place.
Well, it was all just, it goes back again to those early days where if I wanted anything beyond, clothes, food, shelter, the basics, I had to pay for it. And so in middle school, I was buying and selling stuff on eBay to feed my paintball addiction when I was 12. So that job at the farm, I got that when I was 15. And, naturally I was a bit precocious at that point, given the experience I'd had. And so he just kept giving me more and more responsibility. But yeah, by the time I was 16, I had his rentals, and he'd go to Aruba for a good portion of the year. I'd maintain the farm as well. But it just seemed normal to me because I was also one of the younger siblings or younger kids in the family. I have older siblings. And so I think part of that too led to, me being especially precocious, I guess is the word to use it again.
Absolutely. And so you got this really important skill sets that you were developing, not much as the job itself. The job could be anything, but the important thing is the skills that you developed in managing all of these different portfolios, parts of this person's portfolio along the way.
Sure.
And so you were able to take that and then start your own business. And now you're in the land development side of things, and you were able to move to Colorado and utilize that to help fund your investments as well as fund your lifestyle. Yeah. So talk to us about how you went about positioning yourself in Colorado now to go about start this land and development business. Like how did that come about?
Yeah. So whenever I want to learn anything new, I as opposed to going and figuring it out on your own, I want to go find the person that knows and learn from them. So again, this all sounds far more planned and calculated in hindsight, but starting any sort of business is like trying to go up the stairs in pitch black and you're tripping every other step, and you just kind of figure things out as you go. So I want to make that clear to people. I sound a lot more polished in hindsight than it is in reality as you're moving forward. So when I moved out here, bought my second rental, and I met a guy at the local real estate group that had been building houses, buying and selling land, doing pretty much everything under the umbrella of development, land and development for 40 plus years. And he wanted help in his business, and in exchange, he was willing to share what he knew with someone. He was kind of, a lot of times you get older, you want to share what you know. He didn't have any kids. And so I went, and every weekend I would drive about an hour south. So I live in Colorado Springs. He was down in Pueblo. And I would help him, learn from him, just see what he's doing. And that's really where I got into that niche specifically. It makes more sense out west here because there's tons of land and subdivisions that failed years ago that are available and now growing and, less built out than back east where I grew up. But anyways, so that was originally what got me into that niche specifically.
Gotcha. And so it sounds like you were able to position yourself in that way because you were able to find a mentor. And when you found a mentor, you found a way to provide value to that mentor, right? Yeah. In his case, he had this long, successful career. He was looking for someone to, help him out with a day in and day out of his business. And you took the initiative to say, hey, look, I'll be willing to help you out. And in return, you got incredible amounts of knowledge that was able to jumpstart you far beyond what your age was at that time.
Yeah.
And so at this point, right, so you got this experience, you got to learn from the successful developer in Colorado. And so how did you transition to starting your own business from there?
It was just natural over time, slowly and steadily. I went through projects with him. I helped him source the land, going direct to seller for these spec houses and whatnot. And, we partnered on a few small deals, and I went through the process of building houses with him, and then eventually just started doing it on my own. First with the land, just flipping the land, and then eventually putting houses on a couple lots at a time, doing a few specs at a time.
Gotcha. And so I want to rewind back because I know that you had mentioned that when you were still back in Ohio, you were helping this guy while you were in college, right? Or is this while you were in high school?
That was high school. Yeah, that was high school. In college, I managed a landscaping company, actually. So, yeah.
Oh, wow. And so, fast forward to today, like, do you use any of the stuff that you learned in college, or is this primarily all from what you've learned throughout your experiences with your real estate, mentors and things like that?
To answer very bluntly, college was worthless. That was a big, in hindsight, I absolutely would not have gone to school. Bunch of people that knew little about what they were ostensibly supposed to be experts on. I learned through the jobs I had and actually being in other people's businesses, managing people, managing aspects of their business, being responsible for gross margins. But yeah, no, college itself, I have nothing positive to say about.
Wow, that's powerful. And obviously for many people who are not ready to hear that yet, it could be very unpopular and very, a very unpopular opinion by many people, but understanding that there was still education that was taking place there, right? It may not have been in a formal setting in the classroom, but ultimately the stuff that you're applying today is the stuff that you did by learning from experts who are actually doing it, learning by doing, learning by making mistakes. And that's where you're able to get yourself in the position where you are today.
Yeah, just going and doing, and that doesn't necessarily mean taking huge risks. So often people hear that and they associate that with jumping off a cliff without a parachute. But no, it could be working for someone in the position you want to be in, an investment company, helping someone on weekends like I did. Going and starting whatever it is you want to pursue does not mean taking huge risk and risking yourself financially without a knowledge base. It could just mean, like I said, going and beginning to learn or working for someone.
And so you did this about on the weekends. You said it's about an hour drive from where you were, and so how long throughout this period of time were you going back and forth?
Well, I mean, I still do all the time because to this day he's just a good friend. He's a very, very good friend, and we invest together and just talk business. And now it's just fun. We spend, I try and see him every week, especially as he gets older.
That's awesome. And so what does your life look like now? You have this business, you go back and forth on the weekends to this one of these mentors that you have. You spend a lot of time on the mountains and the beach. I guess, what does your life like? Outline a week of Dan Haberkost right now.
Sure. Yeah. So usually everything to me is about priorities and standards. And so business is most certainly not at the top of that list. And so I always, people and hobbies are generally above business. So I'm very clear about priorities as I'm heading into the week. What are the things that I have to get done? I make sure they're on the calendar. I generally knock them out very early in the morning. But aside from that, especially this time of year, I usually go snowboarding one day during the week, Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm pushing to scale my land business right now, especially as the economy turns. We can talk about that more, but I'm working more right now than I have for a while. I had some turnover of employees and entering into some new markets. So I do work most days, but usually 2 or 3 in the afternoon, I go work out with my buddy, go to the gym, and he's in the same business. We talk and weightlift, and then I'm done after that. But sometimes, it really just depends what's going on that specific day. The point being, I don't have to have a set schedule. I never set an alarm. And when I wake up in the morning, my priorities are my priorities. That's really the whole point of having a business, in my opinion.
I love that. Absolutely. And so you mentioned the word priorities. Do you set your priorities and the things you need to get done on a week-by-week basis? Do you do that on a day-by-day basis? I mean, how do you go about planning your schedule to some degree?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So I do a meeting every week with the same friend I go work out with, where we are kind of go back and forth. What problems are we facing in our business? What are our goals? We hold each other accountable to our goals and commitments. So that for me is a good way to focus each week and know what I need to work on to get where I'm trying to go. So yeah, that's been a useful tool.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the clarity on where you want to go. That's a crucial component there, because then once you have clarity on where you want to go, you can break down the steps needed to achieve that goal on an annual basis, a quarterly basis, a monthly and weekly basis. We use this thing after reading this book called Traction by Gino Wickman, and we implement what's called the EOS. And it's a similar concept as what you're describing. Is we have these weekly meetings that go over the problems in a business, what we're looking forward to achieving, the task that we wanted to achieve on a week-by-week basis. And it's really made a big difference on the impact of our business.
Yeah, with some of the questions I know you're going to ask me here coming up, one of the biggest things is just number one, clarity, and then intention every day towards that goal and just working on something consistently. I mean, real estate's great, but you can go make millions of dollars in just about any business, right? It's just consistency and slowly and steadily creating a mastery over your niche and not getting distracted, which is so much harder to actually do than it sounds, right? Because it's so easy to get distracted.
Absolutely. Shiny object syndrome is a real thing. And sometimes you're gonna reach a point in your business where you're like, what am I doing? Like, I'm not seeing results. I don't think that this is going to be worth it for the long haul. And there was this picture that someone had posted where it's like a miner, working away at like a piece of rock, right? And he's building a tunnel. And what a lot of people do is they work, and then they quit. And it shows a picture of this miner right before he hits that piece of gold at the end of the tunnel that he was digging so far. And the last thing people should be doing is taking a step back and quitting just before they are able to reach that next level in their business. And as you're saying, sometimes it's a matter of focusing and niching down and staying true to what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, agreed.
And so at this point right now, so where do you see yourself? I know that you're saying that you're trying to scale your business right now. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's getting better. I love listening to Alex Hormozy's podcast. I don't know if you've listened to his at all, but he talks a lot about just mastery over one thing over the long term. And that's so true. If your goal is to scale something, right, exponentially, just being the best at whatever your niche is the way to do that. And so on the back end, I'm working on getting better data and processes around pulling and pricing land, because all of my mailers have offers right on them. In the middle, and we can talk about failures and lessons learned, because there are many of them, especially this year was an interesting one. In the middle, working on training and hiring and consistently coaching my acquisition managers to be better, because especially now it's gotten very competitive in the Southeast and you have to be better. 3 years ago, it was far less competitive in land. That is not the case now. And then on the dispo side of things, working to develop relationships with all of the largest builders in the country, because I like land and specifically infill, because it's really a blue ocean in that most of the big builders have partners who go out, they take large tracts of land, subdivide, and bring them a whole subdivision. But what about within all of the existing subdivisions, right? Take Florida, for example. You go along either coast, there are hundreds of thousands of infill lots. These subdivisions were done decades ago. They're now getting built out. Who is bringing that product to the big builders? There is nobody. It's fractured. They have their own land acquisition department. Then they have a bunch of different realtors and there's no, you see what I'm saying? You see what I'm getting at? It's a very inefficient market. And so we were talking to Clayton Holmes this week in one of the markets we're in, and just the local rep, right? He was thrilled by the idea of somebody bringing him the product they need consistently and them not having to go out and do it. So I'm really working on systemizing and scaling this into a far more sustainable and just systemized, because that's not my natural. I'm the stereotypical entrepreneur, right? I love public speaking, good at sales. I'm hopelessly disorganized and distracted. And so now out of necessity, I've gotten better there, but that's not my natural skill set. So really working on implementing systems, processes, and just making this a repeatable business model that can be scaled into much, much higher numbers.
I love that. And so what challenges and stuff have you been facing in the process of trying to grow so far? I guess what challenges and obstacles have you had to overcome?
Coming into this year, the primary market I was in turned off all new water taps with no warning, nothing. And that was not a fun week, I will tell you. So I had over $100,000 in lots I had already bought. I had 4 more under contract to buy. Several of the ones I already bought were under contract to sell. So, a huge pipeline moving forward, X amount of new houses I was planning to build. And just like that, they just turned it off. And so all sales stopped, of course, because if you can't tap into the water system, right, you can't put a house there. Just completely froze that market. And I had to quickly pivot. In hindsight, several months later, they did open it up. Still, land continued to sell, thankfully, but at a lower price. But that was a big kick in the teeth. Employees, I was negligent. I was remiss on recording, listening, coaching. And, I had a problem employee that I didn't handle quicker. My fault. So getting rid of him and getting better people in place and getting better training and systems in place has been huge. Again, stereotypical there. I hate managing people, so I've had to force myself to do it. And then I would say those are probably the biggest things that I've run into, and just staying on top of consistency and tracking my numbers. Because when you can look back and say, all right, I sent X mailers here, X mailers there, got X result, it really tells you a lot about where you should be focusing, where you shouldn't be focusing, or my pricing too low. Getting a better handle and grasp on my numbers and KPIs is another thing I am continually working on.
I love that. So it sounds like systems, management and leadership, as well as KPIs to track those. And so, systems, you made a good point in that a lot of this is just a funnel, but being able to make it so that way your processes are constantly repeatable and everybody in the business understands what that is going to help keep things smooth and running like a well-oiled machine. Talk to us a little bit about some of the systems that you've kind of developed, especially most recently, where you're trying to scale.
Yeah, one of the biggest things is integrating everything into my CRM. So I use Pipedrive. So for example, I've got fail safes where just recently I've integrated these, where what are the common things that my guys have been missing as far as due diligence. So little things like back taxes that they didn't check, or other owners on the deed they didn't check, or so on and so forth. So I took all those things, and every time they move a deal from negotiation to contract, it pops up. Did you do this? Are all these things set? I integrated the CRM with DocuSign and all my contracts, so they can just send purchase agreements right out of Pipedrive. Working on integrating the phone system, all the data up front. Stuff like that. And then just, more on the front end when people are new, I've recorded all of my SOPs as far as how do you price, how do you do diligence in North Carolina versus Florida versus Colorado, right? All of that working on just, to put it simply, Chris, if it was your first day, I can hand you a manual. Chris, here is a video walking you through how to do every single thing that you are ever going to have to do in this role.
I love that. Yeah, we do the same thing with our VAs as well, because as you said, things change, people change, and sometimes you need to make sure that you can plug someone else in right off the bat and they'll be able to take right over. And if you have these processes established, it makes the process a whole lot easier for the new person who's taking on the role, but also frees up a ton of time for you from having to repeat what it is that you taught already. So that's great.
Yep.
We use a software called Loom, and Loom allows us to record our screen and record our video at the same time. Yeah, and that it's a matter of just sending that video over to someone and letting them watch it. So that's great. Now, in terms of leadership, I guess it sounds like something that is not your favorite thing to do, but it's definitely a crucial component of the business. Yeah. Is there anything that you've done to kind of help improve either your leadership abilities or the way you manage and work with people? Talk to us a little bit about that.
That's a great question. Self-awareness goes a long way in all aspects of life, but here especially. I'll tell you, when I was in college at that landscaping company, I had a person. He did a personality test. The guy who owned it, who handled or hired everyone, and he and I were very, very similar, and that created a lot of self-awareness because I realized how he was perceived. And sales, negotiation, great. I'm good there. But in the context of business especially, I can be very blunt, to the point, abrasive. I give no recognition naturally, right? So I redid this. So fast forward to today. I called him. I redid that personality test. I talked through it with him because, I had done it 6 years ago. And I really try and keep those things at the forefront of my thinking where, no, tell them good job. Because that just doesn't occur to me. For whatever reason, I don't need or get anything out of recognition from other people, so I don't give it. And so I'm really working on that. It's funny. I was just talking about this yesterday with my buddy, and he's like, "Did you tell your employees good job today?" I'm like, "Yes, I did." And then on top of that, working on being patient and just keeping these things top of mind for me has been really helpful. And thinking about not wanting to be perceived the way the guy I worked for in college was. That has been really helpful. I really enjoy these. Culture index is the one I find most accurate and useful. And I've been giving that to all hires, and then also just knowing where my strong and weak points are and keeping that top of mind has really, really helped. and then putting his systems and processes and SOPs in place to try and compensate for my lack of organization has helped as well.
I love that. Yeah, I just interviewed Chris Miles on a previous episode, and one of the things that he had mentioned was the predictive index, and it's similar to these other personality tests. And so, is this something similar to what you've been utilizing as well, or is there another test that you like to use?
The culture index is the one I like. Of all the ones I've taken, I have never seen one so spot on for everything, good and bad. It's crazy. But anyways, yeah, that's the one I've been using.
All right, I just wrote that one down too because I took, like I said, I took the predictive index and it was creepy how well I felt. It broke me down.
Yeah,
and so maybe this is going to be another opportunity to kind of get a little bit of insight.
Yeah, no, it is, and it's important. You got to keep those things top of mind and compensate your weak points top of mind and compensate for them.
Absolutely. And so the third thing we want to talk about is the KPIs you mentioned, right? So this is for any business owner, for anyone who's looking to make sure they have a good pulse on what's going on with their business. KPIs are a critical component to track. And so in your case, what does the process look like when it comes to determining what KPIs you should track and how you go about tracking those on a regular basis?
Yeah, Chris, I'm getting better here, but I don't have this dialed in like I'd like to, because we have had to pivot to different markets. A couple of the markets I've been in Colorado have just really slowed down. And so as we're pivoting, trying different types of mailers and so on and so forth, the biggest one that I'm focused on getting dialed in again is just how many mailers for each market do I send to get a deal. But the reality is that personally, I think in numbers, statistics tend to be logical. And when I think about regression to the mean, am I really sending enough mail to get a true regression to the mean? I think a lot of people's KPIs are not reality. So I'm working through that right now. I'm tracking everything as far as mail sent, calls received, deals closed, and then, of course, profit per deal, so on and so forth. But there's still that little voice in the back of my head that says this is going to change next month versus the following month because you're not sending, 100,000 mailers a month, or I don't have really the exact amount it would be required to get, a true average, but I don't think at 8 to 10,000 mailers a month, I don't know that I'm really getting a true, again, regression to the mean there, but I am tracking that closely. And that's the biggest one that is on my mind now as we find more productive markets that we can consistently stay in. So that's the big one for us. Is just, top of the funnel, I sent X amount of mailers, and then doing this for every market and every type of mail piece. How many leads, how many deals, and what was the profit per deal? That's the big tracking that I'm doing.
That's great. And as far as tracking them, is there a manual component to it, or is this all automated?
No. So you hit on a pain point there. So having already paid a lot of money to build out Pipedrive, unfortunately, that is the one thing it's lacking. It does not also have all the data ahead of time in it. And so when we get a lead, they then put it in Pipedrive, whereas there are other CRMs that already have all of the data in it from your upfront mailing and then can better automatically track this, number one, and then number two, just make it easier on the acquisition managers. So, of course, this is something that's going back and forth in my head right now is I look at the sunk cost of everything I put into Pipedrive already and the pain that it would be to migrate all of that to some of the better CRMs. And I think I know what I need to do. I just haven't done it yet. So
I felt that through that camera there.
Damn it. Yeah.
Oh boy, yeah, I resonate with you, man. It's tough sometimes. We are trimming a lot of the fat in our own business this year after we had meetings, end of year meetings with our partners, end of year meetings with my wife, setting our goals for the following year. And there's a lot of painful decisions that have to get made sometimes. And it's just like, I tell you this, like once you do it, it's just like it seems like all this weight just comes off your shoulders because you knew it had to be done. It just
and so on that topic, I did that. I've typed out a list of things I know I should be doing but haven't done. And that one wasn't the highest priority relative to some of the others. So I am working through that list right now because it's so true. A lot of this is not complicated, especially in the realm of real estate. This stuff is so simple. It's just getting yourself to do the uncomfortable stuff you have to do day after day after day. It's just, that's the challenge. It's not logically difficult to comprehend. It's just actually doing it consistently in the long term.
I love it. That rings true for any business, any type of entrepreneurial venture that you're going to go down, for sure.
Yep.
All right, folks. So we are coming towards the end of today's show, but before we finish, it is time for the Freedom 5. These are 5 questions that we ask every guest on our show, starting with the most important question. What is your why? What is the underlying motivation behind everything it is that you do?
Freedom, entirely freedom. Like I said earlier, when I wake up in the morning, my priorities are actually my priorities. And that is the whole reason I started a business. It evolves over time, but that was initially the whole purpose of everything I'm doing here.
I love that. Number 2, what book has had the largest influence in your life, apart from Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you 2. Sapiens and Deep Simplicity are 2 of my favorite books. I would read both of those.
Ooh, haven't heard of either of those. All right, I'll definitely put that on the list. Third question we have here. What is the most impactful thing, whether it's a piece of technology, a habit, or a person, that has helped in freeing up your time?
I was going to say the person would be the older friend who's been a mentor to me. Really what he taught me has been, or he is responsible for a lot of the success I've had. But beyond that, as far as a habit, I would just say getting really clear on what am I trying to accomplish. So looking at my goals and what is the next most important step. If there's only one thing I do this week, what is it? That is very impactful.
I love that. Yep. Focusing. Number 4, what is the number 1 piece of advice you would give to anyone looking to achieve more control over their time?
Yeah. Prioritization, really looking at, I would separate personal and professional here, but starting with professional, looking at everything you're doing relative to what you're trying to accomplish and where are you out of alignment? Where are you wasting time on things that don't matter or aren't getting you to where you want to go? And kind of as a corollary to all that is not trying to do 12 different things at once because you're just going to fail at all of them. It is the same thing every time. I host a big real estate group here in town, and with every new person, it's the same thing. One week, I want to be a realtor. I want a house hack. Oh no, I want to do land, or I'm a wholesale. It's just, you can make a lot of money in any of these avenues. Pick one, stick with it, master it. That's it.
Love that. That's great. All right, Dan, 5th and final question we have here. What is the best way for our listeners to get in contact with you?
Instagram or Facebook. You'll have a mix of business posts and then just pictures of the mountains.
Oh, that's perfect. Hey, well, that for anyone looking to kind of just like make their day a little bit better, you can just take a look at his Instagram account and just take a look at these mountains. That's great.
Yeah.
All right, Dan. Well, tons of great information today. I really liked how you talked about your humble upbringings and talking about the concept of money, seeing the experience you had with your parents and how you managed to get yourself out of that by providing value to other people. I like how you talked about you leverage the experience on other people's dime and being able to take that and build your own company surrounded by the concept of freedom in your own life. I liked how you talked about focusing and making sure that you are able to have systems in place, leadership capabilities, and the KPIs to track so that way you can keep your business moving forward in the right direction. Just want to thank you for being an awesome guest on our show, and I look forward to remaining in touch.
Thanks, Chris. Likewise.
Now, if you like this show and want to learn more about how we can help you free up your time through passive real estate investments, check out www.freedominvesting.com. Make sure to subscribe to our monthly newsletter and schedule an introductory call with our team. We also have a free 7-day course on what passive real estate investing is and how to get started so that you can start your journey towards earning back more time in your life. To all of our amazing listeners here on the Freedom Investing Podcast, my name is Chris Tribio. Till next time.